Students need to know that. They need to be educated on that purpose. And then all of the expectations of students need to serve that purpose. And students need to understand that what it is you're expecting of them, even if it's difficult, is really, really important because it serves that purpose, and that purpose is very important to them. Well, hello and welcome. I'm glad you're here. Hey, look, this is our very first real episode. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about having a well-defined, student-centered purpose for your class, and then making sure that all of the expectations and assignments, quizzes, assessments, all those kinds of things that are expected of students are aligned with that purpose that is student-centered. And we're going to kind of unpack all of those ideas because, well, that's going to really affect how students engage, the quality of their engagement, all those kinds of things. We're going to get to that in just a second. Because this is our very first episode, though, I'd like to introduce the purpose of this entire podcast, the blog, all of the things that are going to go along with it. Our goal is to improve the nature of education by giving teachers an opportunity to challenge their beliefs and their practices. We believe that by doing so, teachers are going to be better equipped to make the tough decisions. You know, what's really worth fighting over and what's worth just letting go, what's really not that important. We believe that it's going to be an empowering experience for teachers, that they're going to have conviction based on vetted and challenged and articulated principles. And we believe that having teachers of that type of character is going to make the biggest difference in education. So what kind of brought this all about was, well, some of the observations that were made because of the school closures due to COVID-19. Of course, the series of problems that everybody's facing makes it difficult to just get through a day or maybe a week. And so it's kind of hard to take a step back and look at the bigger picture, right? I mean, students aren't participating. The academic outcomes are terrible. So is that because of the technological issues that schools and some students are dealing with? Or is it just because they're at home? Or is there maybe something more to it? Is this really, is COVID kind of pulling the curtain back a little bit and letting us see some symptoms of deep-rooted problems in education? I think it's pretty non-controversial to say that education can improve. We can do better. And the thing is, though, growth requires change. So the question is when we go back to, regular in-person instruction in school, are we going to try to go back to the old normal, or are we going to be able to use this opportunity to make some significant, meaningful changes that really put student needs and student development at the forefront and make those things the focus of educational institutions? So that's what this is all about. That's why we called it On Teaching. It's all about learning how to become a better teacher, how to improve the nature of education, all those kinds of things. And this is a journey that's going to require a lot of collaboration, some uncomfortable conversations. I am a full-time teacher, but I certainly do not have all of the answers, and I'm challenging myself deeply when I'm going through and creating some of these ideas and vetting these ideas and trying new things and challenging things and having conversations with administrators, parents, teachers, other, just my peers, right? So I hope you join me. I would love for you to get involved. I've got a Facebook group established where we're going to be discussing some of the topics that are brought up in each episode. I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to hear comments in YouTube. I'd like you to send me emails. I will put all that stuff in the description. All the ways you can get a hold of me, all the ways that you can get involved will be there for you. So I would really love to go down this journey with anyone that is willing and interested. You don't have to be a teacher. You don't have to be an administrator. You don't even have to be a parent. You can just be somebody that's interested in improving education because you realize the powerful impact that education is going to have in our societies and in our culture, good or bad. So this is all about being open and honest and being willing to approach uncomfortable questions and situations. And it's okay to do so because we understand that we're working towards a very valuable end goal, and that is to improve education through improving the practices of teachers. Let's get to it, shall we? So today, what we're actually going to be doing is we're going to be talking about the very first of the, I kind of came up with 7, not tens, with 7 kind of foundational elements of high quality teaching. And I'll get into how we did that in another time, but today we're going to do the first, okay? I'd like to start off with, this comment. The I don't even know if it's an aphorism, but the old notion, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And that holds true. Every teacher's experienced something that most likely resonates with that statement, right? But maybe we're going about it wrong. Maybe it's better to make the horse thirsty and then offer water. We're going to kind of talk about how to do that today, okay? So let me ask you a couple questions to begin, to get your thoughts going this way. And these are the questions we can discuss in comments and through emails and dialogue and in the Facebook group, okay? So first question is, what's the purpose of your class? Maybe you can answer that really well and succinctly. Maybe it's a little tricky. Now, let me ask you another question now. Is that purpose likely to have an intrinsic meaning to the majority of your students? And if no, we got some work to do. If yes, hey, that's fantastic. But do the students know that purpose? And imagine that another adult were to sit in your classroom for a period of time, more than a day, probably more than a week. Let's say 2 weeks. Let's say if an adult sat in a regular 2 weeks uninterrupted instruction, would they be able to tell you the purpose of your class without being told themselves? Okay, well, that's to get the wheels turning. So let's go ahead and get into it, shall we? What we're going to be discussing today is the benefits of having a student-centered purpose of your class, and of course, as well as making sure that all of the activities and expectations of students align with that purpose. In short, if a student understands the purpose, right, and finds it personally meaningful, they're going to be coachable. They're going to give you a sincere effort. And they're also most likely going to better fall in line with just the compliance issues. And the result of all of those things, you're going to have a more harmonious class. It's going to seem easier, but the results are going to improve because students are going to be doing the right things for the right reasons. So by having a well-defined purpose that's intrinsically meaningful to your students, and then ensuring that the expectations and behaviors of those students are aligned with that purpose, you're going to be a more effective teacher. Now, of course, there are lots of components of being an effective teacher, but we're just going to focus on this one. And this is the first. We're going to talk about those two things, having a purpose and making sure that everything is aligned with that purpose. Those are the first 2 in the 7 components. Okay, so this discussion and the following discussions, they're kind of a zoomed out big picture examination of teaching. All of the other stuff is involved, the actual instruction, assessment design, pacing, classroom management, student relationships. All of those things are incorporated here, but we're not going to be focusing on any of those specifics right now. This is big picture idea. All right. Now, just so you know where we're going, here are the 7 topics, right? So number 1, and number 2 we're doing today. That's the defined purpose and making sure that the activities and expectations are aligned with that purpose. Number 3 is going to have student-led goals. We're going to discuss student-led goals. Number 4, grade articulation. So defining grades and making sure the grades are the level of difficulty in achieving an A is appropriate for your class. We're going to talk about how to determine that, why it's important. Number 5, we're going to talk about providing students access, training them on how to be better students, and developing buy-in through that one-on-one training. Number 6, we're going to talk about purposeful practice. And then in number 7, we're going to talk about review, reflection, and remediation, how to best do those things. So those are going to be the 7 pillars. It's not the be-all, end-all in any stretch. It's just a starting point. So if all of this proves to be off the mark, but it challenges you, puts you on a new path. In response to this, you're on a new path where you better understand what it is that you're doing. Even if no changes occur, even if you deeply reflect and you find, no, I'm doing it the right way, that's better. That's worth it to me. So let's go ahead and dig into these first 2 components and get underway, right? Now, it doesn't sound like rocket science, of course, right? But it can be a little difficult to pull off this whole purpose thing, right? So, the purpose of my class is blank. And then the second part's a little tricky, too. I know we've fulfilled this purpose when blank. The reason I put we in that second statement is because it's a team effort. This is an effort of collaboration right here. It's you and the students working towards a common goal. The purpose needs to be valid for the students. Our job as teachers is really to serve our students, to help them to develop. At least that's what I believe. So if you can create that purpose statement, think about it. Is it something that's going to be most likely going to be intrinsically motivating to the majority of your students? If not, it's going to be hollow to the students. They're going to find it of little to no meaning. They won't buy in. You're going to have an increase in all kinds of problems because students don't understand, or they don't have faith that their efforts and their good behavior are going to have some, meaningful payoff to them. Now, let me share you a story with you that kind of made me stumble across this. And I need to be really careful about how I say this because I stumbled across this. This positive realization was a byproduct of a personal attribute that seems to provide more harm than good in my life and the lives of people around me. So it's certainly of no credit. I certainly deserve no major credit for this. Well, here's the deal. I want to be self-governed, and I kind of try to cast off overbearing parameters and expectations. So I kind of do things my own way. I'm a risk taker in that respect, and I didn't do what I was supposed to do, but I stumbled across something that I thought was really powerful. So let me share this story with you, okay? And the reason I couched it like that, because the other teachers that I was working with are superb teachers. I don't believe that teachers can be ranked. I think they can be categorized. You can have ineffective teachers, you can have developing teachers, and you can have highly effective teachers. But once you're within that highly effective, it's impossible to say, oh, this teacher is definitely better than that other teacher if they're in the same category. They're just different. We all have a different set of attributes and personalities, and just like I was describing how my personality that often gets me in trouble, it also has some positive outcomes sometimes. Just like if you're an overly stubborn person, that's going to get you into a lot of trouble, but also it's going to provide you the stick-to-itiveness to, realize some positive outcomes, because you're not going to give up and you're not going to sway. So each teacher offers that, right? We have good and we have bad, and it kind of depends on how we manage ourselves and how we engage with students. Sometimes one teacher will resonate with another just because of personality, and other teachers won't resonate with that same student just because of personality. Nothing to do with efficacy of teaching styles or anything like that. Okay, so all that said, I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal, but the outcomes I did realize that my students had in this program were excellent when the rest of the teachers had less than ideal outcomes. Lots of struggles, lots of fights, lots of problems. Okay, so let me set the stage. This was last summer, and school was closed because of COVID-19. So in summer school, all of the students were going to take an online course, right? So whatever class they had failed, and now is putting them off of the track to graduate on time, right? Whatever class they failed, they had a good opportunity to make up that credit, right? Had a really good opportunity to make up that credit. All online, really couldn't be easier. You get essentially, really, you get unlimited attempts at quizzes and tests, especially on math. You can photo math it. They have a fairly limited bank of questions. So, if you just write down the question and the answer that goes along with it, after you did the test and they show you the answer, you can see that question again. So it really doesn't take a whole lot of learning. It just takes a little bit of resourcefulness to pass in this kind of situation. I do not like these kinds of online courses. They're becoming super popular in education, and universities, well-respected universities, even use them now. But I think of a quote I heard by Arthur C. Clarke. He said, "A teacher that can be replaced by a machine should be." I agree. Doing this kind of situation isn't teaching, but from one teacher to another, depending on, and I think it has to do with purpose and alignment of activities with purpose and educating students on those 2 points. How the teacher approaches that, I think, has a very, very powerful impact. And well, here, let's get into it. So the way the summer school is run, students were, a group of students was assigned to each teacher. And the teacher was supposed to manage the student's progress through the program. So they were expected to meet with the student daily, each student individually daily. If a student was falling behind or failed to show up for one of those meetings, they were supposed to be contacted again directly through phone call. And the teacher was also supposed to notify the administrator and contact the parent. So a whole bunch of stuff, right? And, those are some pretty tight parameters. Oh man. Now, I didn't do that. That's not me. I'm not going to do that. So anyway, what I did instead is I said, hey, look, I believe, I told this to the students, I told you, I believe that, you're in this class, you paid the $100 for this session, so that you can recover your half a credit semester worth. You can recover your half of a credit so that you can be either on track or closer to being on track to graduate. So here's how it's going to work. You have to finish, this list of chapters at a minimum of a 70%. And I described how the tests worked, what my role is, how I can help them if they're confused on things, but they've got to reach out to me. But yeah, it's really on them. My job is to help them. And then I just let them go. So the first session, that message was a little weak, but it was there. And my students did pretty well. I had a couple kids that didn't pass. They dropped out really early on. They just, I don't know. They really didn't want to be there, which is fine, right? So then the second session for the second semester, the population of kids I was given were retreads. They were people that failed the first semester in other teachers' classes. They didn't pass. They just didn't follow through. They'd been harangued and yelled at and all of those things, well documented. All that, every time the student fell behind or didn't attend a meeting, a parent was contacted, probably by the administrator, their secretary, and the teacher. So 3 times every single day. So this is a lot of harassment, right? Man, and that is definitely dragging a horse to water. You understand what I'm saying, right? Anyway, so second session, I was given the highest maintenance group of the high maintenance group of students, right? These are all kids that didn't pass in the regular school year, and now they're in summer school, and they didn't pass again. So we're talking about a pretty select group. And so this time, I wanted to build upon my experience in the first session, So I met with the students as a group, not as individuals, and I just laid it all out. If you pass this class, you're back on track to graduate. I imagine that's important to you. You paid $100 to be here. To get that credit, you need to have this list of things done by this date at this time. My job is to help you with that. And if you're having any trouble, if you're having trouble with your computer, if you're having trouble understanding the content, you need to let me know. Communication is really key. My job is to help you get there. It's your job to do it. And then I explained that I wasn't going to be contacting their parents. I wasn't going to be harassing them. Now, what I did do is when students started to stumble and fall behind, I did contact them, but it wasn't a heavy-handed thing. It was like, hey, you're a little off track. You're a little behind. Here's what you need to do to get caught back up. Let me know how I can help you. And that's what I did. So I think I had 22 students that session. All but 2 passed. 2 failed the second session. And the thing that was really, really strange is I did not chase those 2 students down. I notified them, just like I had described, that, hey, you're not towing the line. You're not fulfilling your expectation. There's nothing I can do if you don't do your part. I didn't make this system. I'm just, this is what's got to happen. That's all I did. I didn't call them at the end and tell them they had failed or anything like that. But what was really interesting is both of those students reached out to contact me to apologize for having wasted my time. I think my jaw hit the floor. I was stunned. So I started really thinking about that. What happened? How did this flip around? Because these kids were fighting tooth and nail to fail. And now all of a sudden, with just a different approach, by teaching them the purpose of their efforts and the payoff of their efforts, and then making sure all the things that they were supposed to do aligned with that purpose and that payoff, it flipped around. I made them thirsty, offered water. Now again, I didn't do that because I had some grand insight ahead of time. I did it because, I'm kind of defiant and sometimes maybe a little lazy. I didn't want to harangue those students all day, every day. That's no good. I wanted to do something that I felt was a little bit more meaningful and develop a different sort of relationship. Either way, that was my experience, and that's how it worked. So, I don't know. It worked out really well, and it's kind of funny because I did what I wasn't supposed to do, and I just gave the students all the rope they needed to hang themselves, but I didn't do it in a way that I was being lazy. So, I sat down with the administrator that was in charge of the summer school program after the fact, and I had informed her of what I was not doing. And she was okay with that. She said, okay, I trust that you're going to work, but you need to make sure you have the documentation of these things minimum, because this is what's, been deemed as required by the district, right? So, I made sure that all the boxes were checked, but, I also knew that if the students passed, nobody would really care if those boxes were checked. And, so I got them to get there by making sure they understood the purpose of the class in a way that was meaningful to them. And then I made sure that they understood that the expectations of the class were serving that purpose. So by them getting up in the morning and doing their work and making sure they got through everything they needed to do, they were going to have that payoff. Right? That's what we did. Okay, so now, I also want to make sure very, very clear. I want to make it very, very clear that the other teachers in that program, they followed instructions, and they had a lot more trouble. But it's not because I'm a better teacher than them in any way, shape, or form, and those aren't empty words. I really look up to a lot of those teachers. This is not that's one of the things that's really difficult about this entire project, right? We're going to be talking about things that are uncomfortable. So I had a positive outcome, but it wasn't by design. It was actually kind of by accident, stumbled into it, and I don't mean to take credit for it or heap praise on myself. It's just the strongest example I have in my mind to share. I do have one more example. We'll get through this one a little more quickly, right? It's going to be outside of academics, but still with high school age kids. Cross-country athletes, they have to run a lot. They have to spend hours and hours, right? They get up early in the morning before the season starts, especially here in southern Arizona. It's hot. So they're running probably just before the sun comes up. Otherwise, it's too hot during the rest of the day. So they're getting up early to run. And I know a lot of my students that are in cross country during the school year, they get up before school. They get up at 5 a.m. to do their workout, right? Now, it's possible that those students are doing that because they're afraid of punishment. Maybe they have to turn in a log. But I don't think so. I think if students did that, if the system was set up like that, the results wouldn't be there. The positive results in races would not be there. Students would either lie and fake the log, or if they ran, they just wouldn't run at the intensity intended. They wouldn't do it right. And so, of course, they wouldn't develop as they needed, because it's really hard work. So they have to understand why they're suffering. And they have to understand that this suffering is leading to something better. They have to understand how their expectation aligns with the purpose, and that purpose has to be meaningful to them. Do you see what I'm talking about? It has to be intrinsically meaningful to them. Okay? So, the students that do that, man, they're successful. The students that buy in and are willing to suffer, the payoff's there. So at the time I'm putting this whole thing together, schools, they're still closed because of COVID-19. Students aren't responding to distance learning, as you probably know, right? They're not participating at all. They don't show up to Zoom meetings. And a lot of them that do, they just won't engage. Like, they'll be there, but they won't engage. They won't even, type a response to questions. And quite a few of them just show up. Their cameras are all off, but they'll show up, cameras off, and they're obviously not there at all. They just leave. They go back to bed, whatever, right? That's because nobody's there to tell them, hey, get your notes. Where's your pencil? What are you doing right now? Why aren't you trying this example? What is it that you're doing to help yourself be a better student right now? Is what you're doing right now going to be something you're glad you're doing that you did in a week? Nobody's there to harangue them like that, right? So the reason I bring that up is because what's going through students' minds in this kind of time is it's a simple calculation of risk versus reward. So just like with the running, if they don't understand the reward, they're not going to take the risk. They're not going to go through that uncomfortable, difficult process of getting up early, going for a hard run. If students don't understand the purpose of a homework assignment that's really challenging, they're going to avoid it. If it's got a heavy consequence behind it, they'll either cheat, they'll fake it, or they'll just not do it entirely. But they won't do it with fidelity. They won't do it for the right reasons, and because they're not doing it for the right reasons, they of course won't have the proper payoff. So it's really, really important that students understand the purpose of the class, and that purpose is meaningful to them. It's really, really important to have that happen. Now, how that purpose looks, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think it depends on the population, on the age, on the class, on the teacher. There's kind of two camps when it comes to purpose of education. If we zoom out even a little bit further, you've got your industrial view. The purpose of education is to get a job, to be able to go to college, right? That's it. Or you've got the more classical liberal view. The purpose of education is personal development, expanding your horizons, right? So you've got those two camps. You can get too far in one or the other in most classes, I believe. Now, personally, I believe that the liberal definition of education is really what's important. It's about personal development. I want my students to be adaptable. I want them to be resourceful. I want them to have the confidence that they've earned through problem solving, through challenges, through learning how to manage some of the cognitive distortions that occur when a student's been really challenged, when they feel insufficient. I want them to be able to communicate. I want them to be creative. I want all of those attributes to be developed through education. I really believe that's the key. But that's my opinion, and that's for my classes. I teach math, which might seem like a kind of a funny, it might seem like a juxtaposition of ideas right there, right? Because math to a lot of people is very procedural, and there's no application, and there's really no meaning in it for the students. But I disagree with that entirely. But maybe that's definitely a different conversation. But whatever your purpose is, it needs to be well thought out, and it needs to be aligned with. It needs to be something that is of great interest to your students. Now, let's talk about aligning your actions with that purpose. You see, I firmly believe that the second best way to secure failure is to have your actions misaligned with your purpose. The best way is, of course, not to have a purpose at all, not to have a goal. But the second best way is to have your actions malaligned with your ultimate goal. Happens all the time. Happens all the time. It's super, super easy to do in all aspects of life, really. Now, on the surface, it might look like your homework is aligned with the class's purposes. It may seem that way, right? So let's dig into that a little bit. Let's say that you're teaching let's say your purpose of your class is to prepare kids for success in that class in college. So your class is populated with college-bound students. Say, for example, a pre-calculus class. Those kids are going to go to college. So I think it's a valid purpose to say, hey, the purpose of this class is to get you ready so that you will be successful in math classes in college, and maybe even test out of quite a few math classes. I think that's a pretty decent goal, a pretty decent purpose. And I think students that are college bound will find meaning in that, right? So, it might seem like homework is a slam dunk. It's already aligned with the purpose of the class, right? But maybe not. There's some things that I think should be considered on just homework. First of all, is the level of complexity appropriate? Most high school students, they're not equipped with the student skills to be successful in college. So to help them get there, you're going to have to stretch their abilities. You're going to have to demand of them things that they're uncomfortable doing, that maybe they're insufficient in one way or another at performing at that level. And that's going to be very difficult for them. So it's not just the math they're learning. They're also developing the skills of being able to learn math. And that's going to be tough, right? So if your homework is all procedural and they just have to copy or imitate what they just learned, probably not aligned. That the purpose of that activity is probably not aligned with the purpose of the class. And then you got to consider, well, what happens in review? Suppose that homework is difficult. What happens in review? If the homework is just, collected and graded without reviewing the thoughts that students might have had, the mistakes, the discussing how they engaged or how they avoided, because avoidance is a big thing students do when they're challenged. If you're not making those observations and having those conversations with students and doing so while you're maybe even doing a little of content remediation, then it probably doesn't really help students prepare for college, right? If they're just doing it so they can get the 5 points or whatever in the grade book, definitely that activity does not align with the purpose of the class. Now, the third point I'd like to bring up is the quality of the homework performance required for successful outcomes on assessments. What I mean is, can a student, just an average student, we're not talking about a gifted student or one that's particularly talented in this class, can an average student do poorly on the homework, skip it, cheat on it, use photo math, things like that, and yet still do well on assessments? Because if the answer to that is yes, then the homework is not serving the purpose of the class. It's misaligned. And so those would all be problems. So all those things need to be the other way around. The homework needs to be at the appropriate level. So if this is a college preparation class, the homework is going to stretch students, and students need to understand that. And then the review needs to be a learning opportunity, and performing well on the homework, taking advantage of those learning opportunities, needs to have the payoff that comes with the assessments. If the assessments are so easy that students don't have to do the homework to learn to do well on the assessments, then everything's out of alignment. It all becomes, in effect, busy work. So anyway, I understand, though, that these things would be difficult to do because you're going to get a lot of pushback. It takes a lot of courage, especially today. In today's educational climate, it takes a lot of courage to have high standards and to demand student development. Change is hard. Change is hard for us. It's hard for them. It's going to be, you have to be on top of your game. You have to have that purpose defined. And if you have that purpose defined and you can say, this is the purpose of the class, this is the way in which these activities are serving that purpose, it doesn't give anybody that's angry at you for having those standards much to work with, especially if you can say, this is how we're promoting student success. It's usually a slam dunk conversation. So that's a topic for another episode anyway. So now you might be wondering, how do you make time to review homework appropriately? How do you make time to give students the chances to discuss things, to collaborate, to stay on pace? Well, my response to that, because it is time consuming, it's very, very time consuming. In my own experience, is sometimes a homework review will take the whole lesson because it's appropriate. But if that is serving the needs of the class, then it is worth the time. Also think about it this way. Which is going to really help the students learn? Your lectures or reflecting on their thinking? Man, it's got to have a balance too, right? So it's a tricky thing to do, but well, we can talk about that again later, because that's a big topic in and of itself. So let me give you one more example, right? A positive way. So I've kind of outlined some of the things that can go wrong with assessments and homeworks and things like that. So let's flip it around. Let's say that you're teaching an AP class, and the test for your class has the AP test for your class has a particularly difficult portion, a gatekeeper. Students that want to pass that class to get college credit, want to pass that test, they have to do well on this difficult portion, right? And because it's difficult, they're inclined to skip it, right? So if you're like, well, I'm going to make sure they have access to this practice, and you just give it to them, you give them those styles of questions that are in that difficult portion on homework and tests, that's a good start. But I think that's insufficient, because students are just going to say, oh, this is hard. Even if they understand the purpose of the class, they're going to say, oh, that's hard, and they're going to avoid it. They're not going to want to do it. But if you coach them on the purpose, and you explain to the students, hey, this is going to be hard, and you're not going to be very good at it at first, but the only way to get to where you want to be, the only way to fulfill the purpose of this class is through this gatekeeper, then we have to do this, and I'll help you. And you explain to them that you're not expecting perfection immediately. Development takes time. You've probably seen the picture of success where, people think it looks like a straight line, but it's got all the squigglies in the middle. That is exactly true. That's how it works. It's ugly and it's uncomfortable. So by coaching the students ahead of time and explaining to them your belief, they're going to be willing, and they're going to engage with the level of fidelity that is required to truly develop and realize the positive outcomes. They're going to do much, much better because they're going to do the right thing for the right reason, because they understand how it fits. It's worth the suffering. It's like the kid that gets up at 5 a.m. to go running. They understand that suffering brings about development, and that development is going to compound over time. And over time, they're going to get better and better and better. And then when it counts, they're prepared. So when students understand how it all fits in, they're good to go. So let's wrap this up. Your class needs to have a purpose that is most likely meaningful in an intrinsic way to the majority of your students. Students need to know that. They need to be educated on that purpose. And then all of the expectations of students need to serve that purpose. And students need to understand that what it is you're expecting of them, even if it's difficult, is really, really important, because it serves that purpose, and that purpose is very important to them. So that's it in a nutshell right there. So now, I want to hear from you. Am I washed up? Am I totally off base? Am I full of hot air? Or did something resonate? What was anything? What was challenged? What belief or practice of yours was challenged? Now, it might be challenged, and then, you come back later and say, I'm going to stick with what I'm doing. I think that's worth it. I think that's good. That's fine. But I do want to hear from you. I want the conversation. I want to be challenged. I want to challenge you. I want to talk back and forth. I I want us to all have the willingness to exchange ideas, to have civil disagreement, to have discourse, all of those things. So let's talk about it. Leave me a comment. Send me an email. beardedmathman@gmail.com is probably the best way to get a hold of me. I'll leave all of that information in the description, but I do want to hear from you. And I thank you very much for being part of this, for reaching out. And I think it's going to be, I hope it's going to be a powerful experience for all of us, and that our students ultimately will benefit from our efforts. I hope you have a great day. Be safe, be well. And until next time, I'll talk to you guys later.